To live pictures from Gaza, where there have been fresh Israeli airstrikes overnight, and there are reports that at least 13 people have been killed, including women and children, and this is according to the Gaza Civil Defense. So we're just monitoring the live shot from the Gaza skyline. Previously, this is now Khan Yunis. We've seen black smoke rising in Gaza as well this morning, and of course all of this after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to continue the fight against Hamas with growing intensity. And in respect to that, we are watching also protests in Israel against Benjamin Netanyahu's latest strike. So the live shot there, protesters making their way to Jerusalem because they are just unhappy with this latest wave of airstrikes. We saw many hundreds of people being killed across Gaza the day before. Overnight, we're being told that tens of people have been killed, and we're just keeping an eye on the live shots there. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking after Israel effectively ended that current Gaza ceasefire and a barrage of those deadly airstrikes on Tuesday, in which more than 400 people were killed. Hamas saying that senior political figures are amongst the dead. And so, like I say, we've been monitoring the live shots from Gaza City after that wave of overnight strikes and the intense bombardment of the night before. And that live shot in Israel, supporters and the families of the remaining 59 October the 7th Israeli hostages on the streets of Jerusalem. They're protesting against Mr. Netanyahu's handling of this whole situation and the renewal of those attacks, throwing the future of their loved ones into jeopardy. Well, the Israeli Defense Forces concluded that at least 34 of the remaining hostages are now dead. A lot to discuss with our Middle East correspondent Yolande Knell, who joins us live from Jerusalem. And Yolande, just where are we with this ceasefire, which, as we're watching there, the aftermath of those most recent airstrikes, is the ceasefire over now?
I mean, the ceasefire was really shattered by what happened yesterday, which was one of the deadliest days since the war in Gaza began nearly a year and a half ago, triggered by the Hamas-led deadly attacks on Israel. What we've heard overnight is that strikes have been continuing. Israeli army radios saying that there were 20 targets that were hit. We're hearing from people on the ground that these were in the south, in the center, in the north of the Gaza Strip. Displaced people's camp, tented camp, among one of the sites hit, where we are told that there was a pregnant woman and her child among those who were killed. The Israeli military said it was hitting terrorist targets, and that one of the places that was it focused on in the north of the Gaza Strip was a location where there were plans to launch rockets. The Israeli Navy has also been firing at vessels off the coast, which it says were being used by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. I mean, what we've seen in the last few hours is not on the scale of yesterday's bombardment, but I think the message is very much that this offensive continues. As the Israeli Prime Minister said yesterday, what we saw in those hours was just the beginning. And, you know, he has said that his aim here is to put pressure on Hamas to agree to release the hostages that it's holding. Of course, as you were saying, the families of those hostages are extremely worried, many of them, about what this means for their loved ones. And we've had them staging rallies. There are other protests going on as well today against decisions being made by the Israeli government.
Yolande, as always, really good to get your analysis. Yolande Knell there joining us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to talk to Oliver McTernan, who's the co-founder of the conflict resolution group Forward Thinking. And Oliver, I know that you are a former negotiator in the Middle East. Just talk us through what your understanding is of where we are with possible negotiations, because arguably, given the strength of those airstrikes that we've been seeing over the past few days, is any potential phase two of the negotiations, is that even feasible given what we're witnessing?
Karen, I think it depends entirely on one man, and that one man isn't Prime Minister Netanyahu, but it's Donald Trump. I think what I gather from conversations with my Israeli contacts is that the timing of this renewal of the bombardment of Gaza is based on the need for Prime Minister Netanyahu to get through his budget before the end of March. If he fails to do that, then he is faced with the challenge of new elections, and many people predict he would not win those elections. So we saw at the beginning of this current ceasefire the security minister Ben-Gvir resigning because he had stopped the war effort, or the military effort rather. And now we see today he is reinstated as security minister. So it looks as if the timing in terms of his immediate objective, getting his budget through the Knesset and the coalition government surviving, it seems that has worked. But I come back to it. I think the only person now who can get us back on track is Trump to intervene, as he did, we were told, before his inauguration.
So given that Trump, at the moment, his focus is on Ukraine and those conversations, we heard so much yesterday, that telephone call with Vladimir Putin, is his eye off the ball? And that potentially is also why Benjamin Netanyahu is taking advantage of that. And I appreciate you referenced that the budget is coming up within the Israeli parliament. But given that President Trump is preoccupied, is that beneficial to Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, the argument I hear is that Trump and Netanyahu are of one mind, that both believe that the way to end the Gaza situation, and in particular to get the hostages returned to their families, is through military pressure. Now, if that is true, I think it is highly mistaken, because in this context, in my experience, actually threats and military action stiffen resistance. They don't bring about the results that are desired. So I think that we're in a complete unknown future at the moment.
Oliver, we're seeing the strength of feeling from the families of the hostages, and we're seeing people out on the streets of Israel. They're on their way, they're protesting, they're on their way moving to Jerusalem. Does that have any, in your opinion, inkling? Does that sway Benjamin Netanyahu in any way?
Again, you know, from conversations with Israeli friends and from visiting Jerusalem a number of times and being in the Knesset, my opinion is that it doesn't, in fact, that he's driven at the moment by the desire to survive politically, because the consequences of losing the premiership, remember, he's facing a serious court case. I think that perhaps is limiting his vision. And what is in the best interest of the country, I think, internally and within the region, isn't always being served by this. What worries me, too, is that what we're witnessing is a total disregard for the Fourth Geneva Convention. In international law, Gaza is still an occupied territory, and that convention obliges the occupier, which is Israel, to protect the lives of citizens, their dignity, to ensure food, water and medicine is available. Well, we've seen all of this sort of disregarded and no real response globally. So I fear what we're witnessing now just isn't impacting on the lives of the Israelis, the hostages, their families, and the 2.3 million people in Gaza, but it's having consequences for all of us. And we don't seem to be aware of that. Without a rule-based international order, I think we are going into very, very dangerous waters.
Oliver, it's a grim note on which to leave this conversation, but we are out of time. Oliver McTurnan, co-founder of the Conflict Resolution Group Forward Thinking, former negotiator in the Middle East. Thank you very much for your analysis and expertise. Much more, of course, here on BBC News.